Hello everyone, my name's Tess. Welcome to this beautiful park and to a whimsical fairy tale story called Oppie Overboard. By a charming little cottage with a thatched roof, Oppie was, as they would call it, born. That is, he opened his eyes for the very first time. His left to see his mother, then his right to see his father right beside. So simple it was to be welcomed as a newfound blusterling. The Blusterlings lived at the edge of town, in this particular garden of Bluebell Cottage, but also in surrounding lawns, and any grounds in fact, northeast of the river. They were a curious folk, which is to say different in every way from the owners of the gardens they inhabited. Among each other, they looked quite ordinary and entirely alike. A Blusterling stood about as tall as a fox when wearing their hat, and no taller than a cat when going without. Not that any of them ever did without the hat, as it was a key part of being a Blusterling. They all wore brightly colored shirts, tights, boots, and belts, in unheard of fabrics like sheet, sock, and underpants. And on each of their heads sat a tall, pointed hat, perhaps their only piece of clothing that wasn't thrifted. It was a lovely scarlet red, a more classic choice compared to other families in the village. All of the Blusterlings, yes all, had beards, which they kept nicely trimmed, and most had mustaches to go with their cheeky grins. They took up gardening years ago, an occupation they still enjoyed. Occasionally, they were also found doing chores on the outside of the house. As long as they had work to complete close enough to the ground, the Blusterlings were cheerful and productive. So Oppie was too at first, for he learned how to dress, what to do, when to feel content. Like everyone else, he woke at night, briefly stood in awe of the shimmering moon, and then got on with whatever needed doing. He trimmed the evergreen hedges and planted bushes. He propagated roses and added mulch to the flower beds. While the lady of the cottage slept, the garden was lovingly maintained and kept by dozens of bustling Blusterlings. Yet a little bit of doubt soon crept in, under little Oppie's pointed hat. It came to him one night, after a storm had ripped through the village. "Have you seen the shutters?" Oppie asked, pointing his itty-bitty finger. Some of the bedroom shutters had been ripped from their hinges by the storm. All around Oppie, scarlet hats leaned back to observe the damage, but quickly shrugged and returned to their duties. Handiwork that high up was reserved for tall folk, who could reach more easily and fall less painfully. For a few days, Oppie tried to recruit other Blusterlings to help fix the broken windows. When persuasion proved pointless, he took his teeny legs up a ladder to fix the damn things all by himself. He did a fine job indeed, and stood admiring his work whenever there was a lull in gardening. The business with the windows turned out to be the first of many instances where Oppie went above and beyond. He was an industrious and curious little hat, which is to say annoying to his fellow Blusterlings. They found all this added effort quite unnecessary and over the top. Soon Oppie earned himself a nickname of Oppie Overboard, a name whispered in scathing frustration, but that he wore with stubborn pride. Even so, that bit of doubt below his hat grew louder and harder to ignore. It had him question the true scale of his usefulness. If I were taller, Oppie thought, I could do some exemplary work. He pondered this more and more often, in fact, that his little legs couldn't keep up with his somewhat taller ambitions. Then, one full moon, Oppie disappeared, and only returned after a fortnight had passed. There was whispering of a different kind this time, of how he had made some wicked pact beyond the borders of the village, where darkness reigned over the rolling hills. Oppie looked the same as before, yet smelled unmistakably different. Furthermore, he now drank more water than any blusterling under any circumstance, tilting his head toward the rain for hours on end. Shortly after his return did the others start to notice one further and most peculiar change. Moving among his fellow blusterlings, Oppie's hat reached higher than anyone else's. He had grown by about a thumb, despite growing being entirely impossible for the rest of them. This upward course continued, ever faster, with Oppie adding another thumb every few days. Before long he rose to meet the windowsills of the living room and kitchen, and took it upon himself to water the planters there. "You'll crack your damned tongue," groaned his father. Oppie had once again been guzzling raindrops for the better part of an hour. "And if you drink for much longer," his father added, "the sun'll getcha, and you'll stay that way for good." He had more to say, but hurried over to the nearest flower bed and promptly went to sleep. Just minutes later, sunlight broke into the garden from the east and hit the sleeping blusterling's clay face. Oppie opened one eye to peek at morning's progress. Rays of glowing sunshine zigzagged across the grass, moving closer and closer toward him. Reluctantly, Oppie turned away from the clouds, sprinted into a nearby bush, and promptly went to sleep. When sunlight trickled onto him seconds later, the tip of his clay hat poked out from above the leaves. Slowly but steadily, Oppie carried on climbing over the following weeks and months. As spring settled into the grounds of Bluebell Cottage, the blusterlings stepped up their gardening efforts, planting, weeding, turning the soil, and encouraging the seedlings with a good chat. It would be the Red Hats' merriest time of year, if it weren't for the big, bothersome boots they had to dodge every night. Oppie had grown as tall as the actual tall folk, and overboard barely covered just how over the top he'd become. He focused his attention on pruning the biggest butterfly bushes and the tallest trees, while carefully ignoring the persistent gossip of his fellow blusterlings. The higher he rose, the less their words mattered, or so he told himself. After all, those words were increasingly difficult to overhear. Finally, in the midst of spring, there came a point when Oppie's extraordinary hide grew impossible to hide. He now left the garden before the first sign of daybreak, to rest among the deer in the surrounding woods. A blusterling of such unusual size was sure to draw scrutiny from the lady of the cottage. Every night, from the faraway thicket, he watched her bedroom window and waited for the light to go out, so he could venture back into the garden. "A few more drops," he gurgled, not even bothering to close his mouth. His father had approached his boots as Oppie gobbled up another cloud's worth of rain. "A few more drops," he repeated, as he eyed his father, "and I'll paint the house from top to bottom." Meanwhile, the blusterling was already walking away from Oppie's feet. Perhaps it wasn't his father after all. Oppie couldn't tell from this high up. "A few more drops and I'll clean the gutters. A few more drops and I'll fix the roof. A few more drops and I'll sweep the chimney. A few more drops, just a while longer. I'll be more useful when." There was always a reason and never an end. By fall, Oppie towered over the cottage and dented the ground with every step he took. Blusterlings were moving into neighboring gardens, where they felt safe from those colossal, crushing feet. If I could reach higher then... The first fierce storm of the season came down on the village and pounded the thatched roof of Bluebell Cottage. Oppie opened his mouth as wide as possible and stuck out his tongue as far as it could until his entire face twitched and hurt. While the tall folk slept through the night and his fellow blusterlings kept far away, Oppie weathered the storm alone. He went to a place of silent focus, imagining himself gulping down each and every one of those dark, dreary clouds. They would make him useful beyond belief. Although the downpour shrouded much of the light, morning crept closer. It hid Oppie's boots and climbed his legs, becoming warmer as it did so. Oppie shifted in place to dispel a strange feeling of heat in his feet and calves. Meanwhile, more vivid rays of sun worked their way over his belt and across his belly. He felt them, but he didn't acknowledge them. He was still fully caught up in his relentless, wicked thirst. When at last realization hit, and he opened his eyes to the obvious glow of daybreak, it was too late. Oppie turned to clay, for good this time. In the garden of Bluebell Cottage stood an enormous clay figure, with its head tilted toward the sky and its tongue outstretched for an impossible drink. None of the villagers, not even the homeowner herself, knew how the sculpture got there. It reached high above any houses, and nearly filled the garden of the quaint little cottage. It was tall beyond belief, heavy beyond imagination. By winter, the lady sold her home to a wealthy stranger, achieving her own riches in turn. She moved away, leaving the cottage to the prying eyes of the neighbors and of other tall folk far beyond. As for the blusterlings, they wandered into the garden every now and then. They scaled the statue's legs and climbed its belt. They looked out over the sleeping village while clinging to the giant terracotta hat. Some blusterlings came because they were nosy. Others came to voice their scorn. But all remembered that fateful name of Oppie Overboard. Thank you for joining me today. My hope is that you felt the wonder and whimsy of this fairy tale place. I wish you a beautiful, restful day.